Howdy folks, it is your Princess Kayatakayana here and welcome to week 2 of 40k month. If you have not already, after you watch this video, please be sure to go and check out week 1 where we reviewed the excellent Mechanicus. You can find a link for it kind of here and there'll be one in the description for the video as well, why not? So, week 1 I specifically said we were going to avoid talking about Space Marines because they are everywhere when it comes to Warhammer 40k games. But I was not going to be able to avoid them for too long, was I? So we are going to start off with the best, and we are going to take a look in retrospective here rather than a review at the excellent Dawn of War trilogy. Let's jump in. So, my first experience with 40k as a whole franchise really was a board game called Space Crusade. And yeah, for you purists out there, I know it's simplified for children, but Space Crusade is still considered 40k officially. I also played its video game counterpart on a system called the ZX Spectrum, which for my younger viewers and my American viewers predated the NES and was sort of the British equivalent of the Commodore to a certain extent. Just take a look at these graphics, folks. For 1992, this was extremely impressive. I remember being blown away. I also wouldn't normally do this early on in a video, but I have just got to play you some of this sound. Now see, what was brilliant about that from my perspective is depending on how old you are, I either just made your ears bleed or I just made you weep with nostalgia. I know there's absolutely no middle ground here, folks. Anyway, now, Space Crusade was great, but it was just very specifically replicating the feel and rules of the board game. Over the next 12 years, we had a few different experiments with 40k franchises. We had Space Hulk Venture to the Blood Angels, which tried out first person, and an evolution of which we're actually going to take a look at later in 40k month. We also had games like Chaos Gate, which, for better or worse, gave us a turn-based experience that was very similar to actually playing with the miniatures themselves. RTS, though, or real-time strategy, was just not a genre the series had ever explored, despite it seeming to be a perfect fit. Now, rumours have always abounded that the Blizzard RTS juggernaut that is StarCraft began life as a 40k title. And you know what? I can see that there are some obvious similarities between the races, but it's something that both companies deny to this day, so I'm not going to go over those rumours too much. By 2004, though, while we had some great games under the 40k license, most of them were still bogged down in their origins either as a board game or as the tabletop game itself. Onto the scene would come Relic, a company that were famous not only for making solid RTS titles, but making titles that added something to the genre, such as with the Persistent Fleets in the excellent Homeworld and the not quite so excellent Homeworld 2. We're going to get to those at some point on my channel, I swear. They would take the core of what it means to be a 40k game, do away with all of the stuffy number stuff that should be in the background, and add their real-time strategy knowledge to make an absolutely incredible game in the first Dawn of War. So I remember back in 2004, the first things that caught my eye as an experienced RTS player were the visuals on offer to me here, and they have stood the test of time reasonably well also. Each unit is incredibly detailed in a way that makes me want to go out and find out more about them. Who are they? Why did they end up looking this way? And it's consistent across all 4 races as well. Why does the chapter librarian literally have books strapped to his shoulders? Does the Chaos Commander even have a neck? And what are the Eldar? Are they elves? Are they cyborgs? Are they both? And the combat animations here are absolutely incredible for this era. Just look at this dreadnought laying waste to these orcs. It's brilliant. It's actually a pity to have to zoom out so that I can see what I'm doing in the rest of the battle. And as with the other titles in Relic's library, it's clear that not only were they 40k fans, but they wanted to make a hell of a solid RTS title here. Something that's always fascinated me is that one of the complaints levied at Dawn of War when it came out was its lack of innovation. Sure, Warcraft 3 and its expansion had come out, and it spearheaded the idea of smaller armies with units that were overall less disposable. But Dawn of War was the first place that idea ever truly shone. Key to this was the ability not only to reinforce your units, but to give each of them a different configuration of special weapons depending on what you wanted them to do. Be it a flamethrower to sap the morale from enemy units, or a rocket launcher to take out vehicles. If you want, no one Space Marine squad has to be quite like any other, and it gives a sense of character to something which could just be generic. In addition, the game changed up the traditional RTS formula that was present in 2004 by having these points on the map that you were required to capture and hold to gain resources. The more points you have, the better equipment you had available to you. It all encourages strategic aggression in an age where a lot of games were based around this modus operandi of build a base, build a huge army, and repeat. It just fits the 40k universe perfectly. Although, as I say, I had played Space Crusade, both the board game and video game, and a few of the other video games, Dawn of War was where I really got drawn into 40k as a franchise. I love the juxtaposition of having good guys who could be fascists, basically because everyone else in the galaxy is a homicidal maniac. I love it, and it really works well in the RTS genre as well. Now, I will say the story itself was nothing new. We were over a year removed from Arthur's fall from grace in Warcraft 3, to say nothing of Kerrigan's forced change of allegiance in StarCraft. So, main character turns evil just wasn't particularly fresh. But it was very well done here for what it was. The biggest shame, honestly, of the single player was that it only has you play as the Space Marines and not as any of the other races. Now see, I do get it. Space Marines are the most popular part of the 40k franchise by a long, long way, which is why we're going to spend most of the rest of this 40k month talking about them. But from a gameplay perspective here, there are 3 other well-realised races that are just as intricately balanced, animated, and strategically satisfying to play as the Space Marines, and I don't get a whiff of them at all during the story except to slaughter them. The game does have a strong multiplayer, and all 4 of the races are different but almost perfectly balanced to play as, and it was a ton of fun back in the day. But it seems that the single-player story is often what this game is remembered for, so the lack of variety is a true pity. And Relic must have realised this was a problem, because it was soon solved after they released expansion packs. So a little aside here, folks. Unfortunately, up until this week, I believed I owned digital copies of all of the Dawn of War 1 expansion pack, and I don't. And the one I'm missing is Soulstorm, which is unfortunately the one that has a lot of fundamental gameplay changes and stuff. So I don't want to talk about something that I haven't played in many, many years. I think I have a disc copy somewhere, but my current PC doesn't even have a disc drive in it. What I'm going to do is not talk about the Dawn of War 1 expansion packs at all here, and I will release a supplementary video down the line when I have played through them all again. So, mind the gap here, folks. Sorry about that. Dawn of War received glowing reviews from pretty much every major review outlet that was around at the time, most of them praising, as I have, the intricate animation and the balance between the various races. It sold around 4 million copies, including the expansion packs, which again, sorry I can't talk about in more detail, and it was obvious that a sequel was going to be in the offing, but not quite in the way you'd expect. Let's check out Dawn of War 2. So Dawn of War 2 released in 2009, and it's an RPG that... Future Ayana, why are we looking at me? Okay, fair enough. You may have heard that Dawn of War 2 is an RTS. It's not. Give me a second, I will explain all. So there's no base building, no resource management, other than each squad's personal energy level and health. You pick party members consisting of 4 squads out of a possible 6. Some of these squads have multiple members, but ultimately the sergeant is the only one that's voiced, and the other members are cannon fodder. You progress through non-linear missions, some of which are optional. The reward is XP and new items, so you can level up and choose new abilities for your party members and equip them appropriately. The completion of any mission furthers the story with a discussion and gives you an option of what to do next. Hell, one character is injured and presumed gone, only to have him return later in a different form. It's an RPG. Okay, so, Future Ayana, hit me with them before the comment section does. That's true, but have you ever played, say, Baldur's Gate or hell, even Dragon Quest? Have you ever played any JRPG ever? Did you make a lot of dialogue choices when you were playing Final Fantasy VII? Wikipedia also says Clash Royale as an RTS. Okay, this one is a valid point. You have co-op, and co-op in an RPG is a thing that's been happening since back in the Secret of Mana days, but you do have multiplayer skirmish mode, which adds in a few more of the RTS elements back, so the multiplayer might be slightly verging on being a hybrid. The game itself is an RPG. So now that I've probably annoyed a bunch of people who were gracious enough to watch this far, why the big change? Well, 2009 was a different time. The RTS genre wasn't much of a thing anymore, really, and it'd be the better part of another year before StarCraft 2 appeared and breathed some life back into it. And that just wasn't a battle Relic seemed to want to fight, they wanted to innovate. So they took the parts that worked from Dawn of War 1, the excellent animation, the unique feel of the 40k world, the all-or-nothing story, and even the offbeat humour of the orcs, and then they combined it with the minute-to-minute gameplay similar to their 2006 title, Company of Heroes. Because of that, the major change in the combat itself is the addition of cover mechanics, be it a convenient waist-high wall or garrisoning inside a building. This would be most important for bringing the heavier guns to bear, because if you leveled the right choices, you actually got a bonus depending on the cover you were in. Also added was a revival mechanic. This would be where a squad sergeant wasn't killed if their health was reduced to 0, but they would fall unconscious and you could revive them if you could get to them. I am much more a fan of this mechanic here than I actually am in first-person shooters. Finally added were the boss fights, which is sort of another tick in the RPG column, really. In a real-time strategy, I'd have found these really annoying and bullet spongy, but here they're plot significant, they require you to quickly move your party members, and often use the full suite of your character's abilities to win. They are some of the highlights of the game, and that's saying something, because I actually think Dawn of War 2 is the stronger of the two titles. The gameplay on offer here is absolutely brilliant, and after 11 years, the visuals really stand the test of time as well, in addition to running like a dream on a modern PC. They've even removed that Games for Windows Live stuff now that the system is defunct. If you don't know what that is, I'm not going to go into it here because I would be ranting for days. Just, if you know what it is, you know, and you will be celebrating the fact that it's not here anymore. We did have one problem persist between the games though. Once again, we are only playing as Space Marines for the single player portion of the game, and I don't understand it nearly so much here as I did previously. We have a long, detailed and very rewarding single player story here. Why couldn't it just give me a mission or two to play as the Eldar or the Orcs? Now this problem would again be rectified in the expansion packs, but not straight away this time. The first expansion pack for Dawn of War 2 was Chaos Rising, which was released a little bit more than a year after the initial game. As the name suggests, the game was focused around a resurgence of the Chaos Marines and the player setting out to stop them having been absent from Dawn of War 2 proper. The game also featured a system where a player could equip their soldiers with Chaos weapons and armour, which were often the most powerful but would lead to the corruption of the squad and the game's bad ending. Regardless of if the player attempted to keep all of the squads pure at all times, at a certain point, the game would pick the most corrupt one of their sergeants and turn them on the player for a mission. Aspects like having that traitor in your midst were where the story took a real step up in Chaos Rising, and it's the first time I've genuinely wanted to know what happened next, as opposed to basically being able to guess. That said, the system was not without its flaws. The resisting corruption mechanic, while it sounds really great on paper, just led to me having to use lesser items and having a bunch of really cool looking stuff in my inventory that I just couldn't use, and that's just an exercise in frustration. Plus, Emperor loved them, we were once again stuck solely with the Space Marines. Once again though, it seems like I'm not the only person that noticed this, as this problem was once again fixed by Dawn of War 2's second expansion called Retribution. Once again, you can play as multiple races, though the item and experience trees have been toned down somewhat for each, and the missions ultimately are very, very similar for each race, which is a real shame. Now, I've actually had a bit of difficulty locating precise sales figures for Dawn of War 2 and its expansions, but it seems to be similar to its predecessor and a little bit better, around 4 or 5 million copies. But here is where the story gets a little bit complicated. THQ, Relic's publisher, declared bankruptcy shortly after Retribution was released. Relic, however, got purchased by Sega, and as it turned out, still owned the Dawn of War rights. That is why, after 6 years on hiatus, we finally got another sequel in the form of Dawn of War 3, which may end up being the last game we ever get in the franchise. And we are going to take a look at precisely why that is in part 2 next week. Thank you for sticking with me, folks. I know this has been a long video. Hope you all enjoyed it. I will talk to you all next week. Peace. I'm out.